relocated to Indonesia. Yes, thank you for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow. No, I'm kidding. But one of the according to a recent report, an idea that's being floated. Now, I don't know what exactly ideas that are being floated mean in terms of the likelihood of them ever happening. But from the different ideas I've heard from people around the Trump administration, and certainly considering the one idea that has actually been put into practice, I like it. Yeah, I think the idea, as it is reported, is that some civilians will be moved to Indonesia while Gaza is being rebuilt. Um, what exactly will be rebuilt, I don't know. Hamas is obviously still in control. If they are in charge of the rebuilding, which I'm sure officially they won't be, and actually they will be, then what will mostly be rebuilt is probably tunnels and anything that can help them kill Jews. Um, but yeah, I think I know this is controversial, controversial among objectivists, controversial generally among people who support Israel. But I very much think, considering that it is a war and considering the type of war it is, removing the population from Gaza is absolutely legitimate. But we are celebrating the at least departure of Biden by going old school with the reality show today. Longtime viewers of the show will remember that when we launched it, it was usually like three topics a day, and today we do have three topics. So we're going to start with the topic in the title, but later on we will talk about the hostage deal and we will talk about Trump being inaugurated and what we should expect in the next 4 years. So, welcome to the reality show. I'm joined by Anders, Michael, and Jim Brown. Jim, I am going to go to you. It's been a while since you were on the reality show, and your thoughts about this particular plan, if it is a plan or idea or whatever we want to call it.
Yeah, it's okay. First, a disclaimer in that I have not thought deeply about this. So, very honestly, I'm going to defer to others. However, uh, I I question the ability to deport an entire population like that. How many millions of people are we talking about? And before we get to that, would you perhaps explain to me what are the basic barriers to Israel simply controlling, annexing Gaza and incorporating it into the Israeli state? Maybe they have to do it in a wave, bit by bit. You know, I don't, is the hostility among the Gazans so high that they would not accept a land of place where they can have opportunity and that where they can work and where they can earn a living, because presumably Israel would provide that kind of a environment for them. So what is this just giving in, this proposal? Is this just giving in to uh, the terrorist resistance, saying we can never overcome it, therefore we're just going to deport the population?
I have a lot to say, but I'm trying to read Michael's face, and I think he really wants to say something about this, so I'm going to defer to him.
Couple things. The last couple polls that I read said that during the war and during this so-called genocide, which of course is anything but, uh, at least 80 to 90% of the Gazans still strongly supported Hamas. And as you all saw when the ceasefire was declared, there was great victory speeches by Hamas in Gaza, and all the Gazans were out looking very well nourished, by the way, well clothed and so on, and cheering about this and saying they were going to repeat October 7th until all the Jews were gone. I don't know if it's every single Gazan, but it's certainly a vast majority of Gazans that want to kill Jews. They've all been indoctrinated. I mean, it's good evidence that kids are being taught how to hold guns when they're very young. They are taught that Jews are the enemy and the great oppressors, and that they are the poor victims and they need to do everything they can. And by the way, martyrdom is great, especially if you're a man, because you get to heaven and get 72 virgins or however many are left. And that's, I'm not making that up. That's not facetious. That's what they are being taught. And again, well documented, not only by the Gazan textbooks, but also by the UNRWA UN textbooks. So we have a very malignant set of people there who really want to see the destruction of Israel. I don't, and by the way, more people were employed, as I'm aware, but more Gazans prior to October 7th were employed in non-terrorist related employment in Israel than they were in Gaza. And they would come across the border. They had special passes and they'd cross through the gates. And then they would come and they would do work, good, peaceful work, contributing work to a society. And then they would go back to Gaza at night. Of course, that's all stopped since October 7th. So I do think we have an extremely malignant population there. They are terrorists. Many of them want to martyr themselves. They think this is a great thing. Their families also get money and continue to get money even now during the war, despite the fact that the things are broke. So I think the chances of being able to re-educate this generation or two in a meaningful amount of time to allow for peace is pretty much nil. One other point I'll make, Jim, Israel was in Gaza until 2005. And then they left Gaza. And the first thing the Gazans did, the Palestinians did, was to destroy all of the greenhouses, so essentially all of the greenhouses. And many of the other buildings the Israelis left because they didn't want to be contaminated by this great, horrible, Satan-like entity called Israel. And so a lot of the wealth that had been built up and the capital investment that existed there was destroyed. And since then, Gaza has never returned to any sort of a positive thing, positive economy. The most impressive thing they've done is this amazing tunnel system, putting the UK metro system to shame. And I'm not being facetious. And spend money on these ridiculously imprecise bombs that have led to many deaths of Gazans as well as Israelis. It is a very, very tough population to deal with, and it's highly unlikely that there's going to be any peace between the two groups in the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Okay, one follow-up to that. Is it your read, Michael, since you're very close to this, is it your read that there's not much political will in Israel among the government to what I would call occupy and rehabilitate Gaza?
Yeah, I don't think there's any belief in the current government, which is fairly right-wing, although they just lost one of their rightist wing people who may or may not be back. I don't think there's any interest in trying to educate Gaza or rehabilitate it directly. I think that the Israeli economy, although it has survived this, is in deep trouble from an inflationary point of view. They have huge deficits now with the war, the costs of Iron Dome and so on. I mean, it's extraordinary. And of course, you've got a lot of the reservists are back in the war, which means that Israeli companies are suffering because the employment's gone down. So I don't think there's any goodwill in Israel to try to rehabilitate Gaza. I think the biggest concern now, as Razi alluded to, is that what will no doubt be a lot, at least a lot of talk and some foreign aid coming in, and whether those so-called dual purpose uses like cement will be used to actually construct something positive, or much more likely to reconstitute this ridiculous tunnel system and so on. So I just don't see it. Lastly, Israeli public doesn't want to see any more dead soldiers. And we're seeing 2 to 3 dead soldiers every 2 or 3 days now in Israel. And this, how you can imagine how crazy Israel is about every single person, since they're basically trading one Israeli for 60 to 100 terrorists, depending on how you count the trade here. So having 1 or 2 soldiers die a week or every couple of days is not going to be an option, which is what will happen if they do go into Gaza.
Yeah, and Michael, you mentioned that before October 7th, many Gazans, thousands, would come to work in Israel every day. Many of those also helped map out the places where the terrorists hit, and
Yes, they did.
You can hear from some of the people who survived that saying, these are people we treated like family. We would see them every day for decades, and they took part in this. And uh, Garbled Words, thank you for the super chat. Garbled Words says Ishai Fleischer showed photo albums retrieved from Gazan homes with snapshots of children holding machine guns with a Hamas flag behind them. If you see the videos from yesterday, and there are many, many videos from yesterday in Gaza when the hostages were moved from Hamas to the Red Cross. Uh, First of all, everybody there looks well fed, and their phones well charged and connected to the internet, which is interesting as genocides go. But um, this is a population that is uh, united again around this one cause of exterminating the Jews. And your question, Jim, of how do you remove the population, or move them all, ship them all to Indonesia? That's a good question, which I don't really have the answer. I'd recommend Norwegian Cruise Line, because I think the Norwegians should take part in it, but I don't think that recommendation is gonna be accepted. Anders.
Yeah, so I don't disagree with really anything that Michael is saying, but I personally think that deportation or moving them to Indonesia or wherever else is a terrible idea, because I think that will just increase, I mean, that will make martyrs of the entire Gaza populations, and they will build up their myths, and wherever they end up or would end up, there would always be the dream of getting back to the homeland. So it's kind of the Palestinian equivalent of the Jewish cause of the last 2,000 years. So I think it would just add insult to injury. I understand that there is no appetite for integrating the Gazans into Israeli society. That would be a multi-generational project. But quite frankly, I don't see any other solution. It's been done before with the Japanese and with the Germans, as we have talked about multiple times here, and I don't see why it can be done again. I don't think that realistically it will happen. Right now, it looks like Israel once again will steal defeat from the jaws of victory, and things may quiet down. We'll get this hostage deal done, they get them back, and we will have a few thousand Palestinians back in arms within not too long. Maybe they will lie low and build up their resources during a Trump administration for whatever reason, but sooner or later it will come back, and will come back in full force, and a lot more Israelis will die than the hostages that are yet to be released. And we will just see a repeat of history again and again, as we've seen since 1967, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of the population in Gaza, becoming Israeli citizens, that's a nice, very, very long-term, decades, many, many decades from now,
Yeah,
fantasy.
absolutely.
Yes.
And I'm not talking about citizenships. We're talking about occupation and ruling it hard and fast, and then establish property rights or whatever they don't have currently, and just imprint on the Gazans that there is no chance whatsoever that you will succeed with your project. So turn your energies to civil pursuits and try to live a decent life and pursue your happiness. And slowly but surely that will happen. Eventually, yes, it's a long-term project, but I haven't seen any other solutions that would eventually bring peace to the region.
So, first of all, I absolutely support occupying it permanently, whether the population.
And by the way, that the same medicine should be applied to the West Bank, to southern Lebanon, and southern Syria.
Absolutely. The problem, and the thing is, when Israel did the disengagement plan in 2005, leaving Gaza, forcing Jews out of Gaza, the reason it was so easy to sell to the Israeli population was because, as Michael said, Israelis don't want to see Israeli soldiers die, and Israeli soldiers were dying there. And that will be a part of an occupation that doesn't doesn't include, first of all, military action. The military action has not been completed. Let's put it that way. Gaza is still controlled by Hamas. The parts that are controlled by Israel are, rubble of buildings. The parts that are controlled by Hamas are where the people are. And that needs to change. And I think for that to change, we still need to see some very, very strong military action, stronger than anything we've seen so far in this war, followed by, a permanent occupation of a population that is completely disarmed at the very least.
Razi, may I ask a question here?
Yeah.
It sounds like all of us are alluding to a principle espoused in this book by John David Lewis, Nothing Less Than Victory. And I'm not on this show very often. You have probably alluded to this book before, I'm going to guess. But the idea, for anyone who hasn't heard it, is that you must crush the enemy's will to fight. That's how you achieve victory. And only then can you rehabilitate the enemy. And it sounds like you are all saying that Israel has not yet done that with Gaza, with Hamas and with the Gazan people. Is that a fair summary?
Not only has Israel not done that, it has made a point, and it made that point from October 7th, that it doesn't want to do that, that the only goal is to destroy Hamas's military capabilities. Now, the last time a war was fought in a way that I think is compatible with John David Lewis's advice was World War II. The last time it was fought, by any good side in a war in that way. And that was not just about destroying, the military capabilities of, Hiroshima and Nagasaki was not about destroying military capabilities.
It's not just about killing people either. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So I think Israel got it wrong from day one, and the Palestinians heard it loud and clear, and knew that basically they have to wait it out. They'll lose some fighters. They'll lose some weapons, but the fighting spirit for their cause is still very much alive and well, which is why this is so clearly a victory for them. I'm kind of transitioning into the hostage deal, but we saw celebrations in the streets in Gaza when the hostage deal was announced that we hadn't seen since October 7th, because it is a victory for them, just like October 7th.
Let me just make a last plug for this book, which I regard as seminal for this type of strategy. It's not just about, and you pointed out the relatively good way that the United States conducted the aftermath of World War II with both Japan and Germany. It's not just about that. This book is full of it's an integrated look at history and how successful, lasting peace only results when you have a decisive end to a war that destroys the enemy's will to fight. So that's all I'll say. It's very, very worthwhile reading, and very well and clearly written.
Yeah. Michael.
Well, I completely agree with you. And I would, for those that are a little less clear about why we had to drop atomic bombs on Japan, and mind you, we had to drop 2, not 1, because obviously 1 was insufficient to get them to surrender. But we pushed Germany into a surrender with a document that said they surrender, and the Nazi Party was removed from power. The Jews have never, Israel has never done that to any of the terror groups. They have never surrendered that I'm aware of. And this is the fundamental problem. You have got to fight until people surrender. Now, the left often says you can't do that with terrorists because they believe that they're going to go to heaven over it. And that's that's like saying you can't treat cancer because it's probably going to win. You've given up before you even started. It's the most absurd thing. Yesterday I was on the show. I gave another example. If someone has recurrent infections, and there are a variety of conditions that give that, what do? Stop after the 15th infection? It's just too much? Let the patient die? No. You continue to treat until victory. And that's what you need to do here. It doesn't matter. You keep cutting off the heads, and if they continue to grow, you just keep cutting it off. And stop with this artificial baloney about people who believe that fervently, that death is a good thing and I'm going to go to heaven and martyr myself, and therefore we can't fight you, that's some justification for giving up. It's a disgraceful view that has swept into Western society, particularly on the left, that people that believe in their cause are good. People that believe in death are bad, they're evil. And that's what needs to be done here. And we do need to go back to fighting in a World War II sort of way. Israel has failed to do that. And as I said, I would say, I don't think it's completely Israel's fault. I am certain 1000% that Joe Biden and Blinken, Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, held one of Israel's arms behind their back the entire time. No question, Netanyahu did not take the most aggressive approach. He probably could have been tougher at the beginning. They certainly could have attacked Hamas with the fervor that they attacked Hezbollah, which, by the way, they didn't defeat in the end either. And another ceasefire, which only allows Hezbollah to rearm. But the point is, we never attacked Hamas that way, and we still haven't. And you saw yesterday with all the videos that this is it's a Pyrrhic victory, clearly. It's a victory that is absurd. If you define victory by the way Gaza looks, you're a fool. But these people are foolish. And they love death and they love destruction. That's exactly what you saw. And as long as they keep believing that death and destruction is acceptable, then we're never going to defeat them, and Israeli lives are always going to be at risk.
Yeah. Anders.
Yeah, no, I agree. And so they believe that martyrdom is good, and they will meet their virgins on the other side or something. So the right attitude to that is that let's help them along to meet their virgins, until they realize that maybe that is not the best alternative.
Absolutely. And Starhopper says, actually, where was this? Oh yeah, Japanese and Europeans were not Muslims. They were savages. Savages come in different forms and belief systems, and absolutely they were savages, and their culture had to be destroyed. Destroying their military would not have been enough. It would have been what Israel can expect now, which is a pause. Israel can expect a pause. Hamas needs to regroup. Hezbollah needs to regroup. These organizations are not ready to fight a big war at the moment, and they will do that when they're ready. But if you completely destroy, of course, at the very least, their military capabilities, but also the culture, to the point that they realize that continuing on this path is worse than death, then that is how you win a war and eventually win the peace, because you fight a war in order to eventually have peace, and that is how that is achieved.
Rosie, can I just want to add? Sorry, Jim, go ahead.
I was just going to say, yes, the Nazis and the Japanese military fanaticism was not Islamic, but they rivaled the Islamics in fanaticism. Absolutely. They were not as widespread. Maybe they didn't have centuries of fanaticism behind them, but they were every bit as intense. And all you have to do is look at the results that they fomented. I mean, the Japanese military and that cult of fanaticism that really was born strongly in the 19th century, started developing then. They invented the kamikaze.
Exactly.
I mean, they were fanatics. So it's easy to lose track of how fanatic they were and how much like they were, how similar they were to this fanatic Islamic movement, because they're now pacified and their history, and they're now our friends. But they were really fanatics. So I just wanted to make that point to someone who might think that this Islamic fanaticism is something new under the sun. I don't think it is. I'm sorry, Michael, go ahead.
No, it's spot on. What I was just going to reiterate that I think, everyone should consider that Japanese were flying airplanes into our ships. Like you said, Jim, they were kamikazes. Does this remind anybody of planes flying into buildings? This is the same mentality in Japan that we have with the crazy Islamic militants. At least there it was against military targets. But it's the same flavor. It might be a bit more intense. And I would also say to you that I do believe there is a fundamental difference between the Germans and the Japanese. The Japanese were fanatics in the same way the Muslims are. The Japanese would die for their emperor, give their lives for it, and go down in a flame of glory. Absolutely the same thing. The Germans liked life. They didn't like anybody else's life, but if you were an Aryan, you deserved to live and be the Ubermensch and the superhuman and so on and so forth. And one of the reasons we probably wouldn't have had to use 2 atomic bombs to knock out Germany would be that if Germany had seen 1 atomic bomb, they would have realized that they were in deep caca. And there was no amount of philosophy in Germany that would allow anyone to suffer the 2nd atomic bomb. For the growing number of American students who have been taught by their idiot professors, their corrupt professors, that what America did in World War II was a genocidal move to drop bombs, like to forget that the emperor told the Japanese to continue after the first bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. And any sane culture would have realized that they were done at that point because we didn't have to stop at Nagasaki. We had lots more bombs and we were making more. And it's exactly the same thing we need to do. We don't need to drop bombs even. We have Moabs, the mother of all bombs. We have huge bombs now that are non-nuclear, that rival what we had, the atomic bombs, not the hydrogen bombs we have now, the atomic bombs that we had back then. We should obliterate, and I mean it, we should obliterate and annihilate Hamas just the way they plan to annihilate Israel. And what we're doing is we're doing very careful laser-guided surgery on Hamas because the entire world somehow thinks that the Gazans who elected Hamas are not part of this. And they are absolutely 90% of them, 80% of them are part of this.
Yeah, I mentioned in the past the one statement Biden made during the debate with Trump that cost him his candidacy. That the one statement he made coherently was, we didn't stop any weapons shipments to Israel except for 2-ton bombs, which are not very effective in urban warfare. Remember, Nasrallah was eliminated with 1-ton bombs, but 84 of them. So yeah, you could have done that with 42 2-ton bombs. But anyway, yeah, this is unfortunately how we are treating war, and we're paying for it. Anyway, one of my New Year's resolutions is to get better at picking up people's nonverbal cues. And Anders, I saw you go pick something up, so I think you have something to say about that.
Yeah, we don't need to dwell on this too much, but when we're talking about degrees of fanaticism, the Germans may not have been at the Japanese level, but they were plenty fanatic. And if you haven't read it already, Dr. Leonard Peikoff's The Ominous Parallels is an excellent read that dives into the philosophies that really created the Nazis and that they took advantage of, basically. So I don't think the argument holds true or I'm convinced that it doesn't hold through that the Islamists are too fanatic to be ever reformed. On an individual level, yes, there sure are individuals who you can't reform, but on a population-wide basis, there are plenty of people who are able to change their mind if they get the right incentives.
Yeah. The person in the chat who used to be a troll, then became Daniel's biggest fan, and now I'm not really sure what you are. First of all, you said on the Daily Objective less than an hour ago that you're not going to comment in the chat until Kfir Bibas is released. So I don't know what changed, but I see that you are active, and you say money can change minds. first of all, try saying that with a super chat so we can test that theory. But no, I mean, people can focus their own mind and choose what they allow to change it and what they don't. Jim, you are the only person on the panel who hasn't been on since the ceasefire deal happened or was about to happen. So, um, yeah, your thoughts on the ceasefire.
Well, I think all I can do, my first thought is that it's unfortunate that if it is true that Israel's political leadership is essentially retreating, giving up through this ceasefire, then that's unfortunate. I suspect what's one of the things going on here. This is very complicated. This whole thing. There are things I've come to learn. There are issues underneath the surface that I don't know about. But I suspect that there is a great deal of confidence being put in the Trump administration to make things better. I see this in part as an expression of confidence in the future, in the Trump administration's influence in the area that can perhaps hold the peace better than the Biden regime. I don't know what you think about that, but you know, I don't know what Israelis on the ground think about that. But
that is a very nice segue into our last topic, which is Trump is now president, has been for what, 2 hours. I don't know what has been done during those 2 hours because I've been here, but yeah, and it's interesting, you know, if Israelis could vote in U.S. elections, Trump would have carried Israel much easier than I think any state. And you know, if you only counted the Jewish vote, it would probably be, I don't know, 90% or something insane like that. And I saw an op-ed recently saying, well, if it was now, he would probably, you know, he might not win with the Israeli right, and he would probably win with the Israeli left. And that's always been a problem with Trump. It's not clear where he stands. He's not a principled man. And you know, he had issues with Netanyahu over the fact that Netanyahu called Biden to congratulate him in the 2020 elections, and those issues like that stuck with him, and he holds grudges. So I don't know. I said before the election and after the election, I think it's going to be very difficult for Trump to be worse than Biden when it comes to Israel. But this deal makes me think, you know, maybe he's gonna succeed in that mission, if that is his mission. But I know we have different views on that on this panel. Michael, you're muted, and it's not because you are pro-Trump.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I think everybody underestimates how bad Biden and Harris and Blinken were for Israel. I mean, the stuff that they said. First of all of the actions that they declared when Biden got up there and told everyone, if you're thinking about attacking Israel, don't. So Hezbollah laughed at him. Syria, to some extent, laughed at him, and the Houthis laughed at him. They laughed at the American military, despite the fact that we were prancing around with tens of billions of dollars worth of military equipment in the Mediterranean and so forth, trying to show everybody how macho we were, but of course, never using it. We couldn't even shut the Houthis down. What was going on behind the scenes, I believe, was much worse than what we heard. And the holdup of military gear to Israel, including when Netanyahu actually had to come out publicly with it in order to shame the Biden administration into releasing some of it so that they could continue to fight the war aggressively, never mind repopulating Iron Dome, so that the missiles that were coming in all the time, including at my house, were blocked before they got there. I think we have given Joe Biden and the increasingly progressive Democratic Party in the US a real pass here, and it's not right because they are extraordinarily damaging to Israel. Ironically, of course, you're right, Razi. There's no question that the Jewish Americans would have voted Kamala back into office. And the same group of Obama-esque people and the same idiot Blinken would have been Secretary of State or people like him and would have continued to make Hamas and Israel equivalent. Like, these are just two democratically elected groups that have equal right to everything, and the rest of it should just be equal. Now, I will say one last thing. I believe that Trump wants to make America great again. And that means shutting down the entire progressive idiocy that's going on in America about globalizing the intifada. This is not part of Trump's agenda. He's not interested in hearing from a bunch of mostly wealthy, spoiled brat kids who Biden pardoned their student loans, if not theirs and their brothers and sisters, that they should globalize the intifada while we taxpayers are footing the bill for them to block streets and block college campuses and so on. So he may be unprincipled, but I think he's very much in favor of America. And I don't see how supporting a terrorist organization that calls death to Israel, death to America, it will help him with his MAGA. And the last thing I will say is that I don't think anybody expects the second phase of this ridiculous, and I agree with you, this is a terrible agreement. It's emotionally a great agreement. We got 3 whole hostages back. Hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, terrorists who've killed Jews, are being released. The total number of Jewish dead on those prisoners that are being released is far in excess of 3. No one so far that I've seen has published a number. So it makes no sense rationally or logically. But the Jewish
Michael, doesn't everybody know that? I mean, in other words, you make this agreement knowing it's not going to be kept. Isn't this an agreement? Isn't this an agreement to get the hostages back? A political expedient, perhaps. But no one thinks this agreement is going to be kept long term, do they?
Yeah, but you're only getting 30-ish hostages back in the first part of it. And the second part of it, which has components of the Philadelphia corridor, which is the corridor, which simple thing. It's the border between Egypt and Gaza, which was used to basically militarize Gaza. I mean, almost all the equipment that came in to make the tunnels and the bombs came in through there, despite the fact that Israel and Egypt are supposed to have a peace agreement. I think the public has been sold a bill of goods here that is a big pile of crap. There's no chance that Hamas is going to agree to that. And by the way, they already violated next week's hostage release. They violated yesterday's hostage release because it was 3 hours late or so. And next week, apparently, they've already pushed it to Sunday. And
well, Michael, would you agree that the principals involved here, the politicians, they know this agreement's not going to be kept? Do you think?
I don't think that there are principles. I honestly don't think this was a principled agreement.
No, I don't think that but I meant the principles. I meant the decision makers. I don't think they're principled.
I think Israel expects to get back 30 prisoners. My wife, who's Israeli, and I were talking about this. I said, "You understand? Only three hostages to 4 hostages come per week until the end of this 7-week period, and then we might get 14 at the end of it. This is not going to be 33 hostages coming in." So, and the reason for this, the reason Hamas is doing this is emotional. It's to destroy Israel so that every week Israel can be hysterical, and they are. It's the only thing on the news, can be hysterical about this. And it's actually appalling that anyone would have caved to this kind of blackmail. But that's what Netanyahu did under the stupidity. This deal was negotiated, by the way, in May. The reason it came to fruition is because Trump said enough already. Now, Trump's a wheeler dealer, and he likes to make deals. I suspect what you said, Jim, is exactly true. I believe that Donald Trump knows there's no chance that part 2 is going to happen. And he's also said publicly, Razi, remember, he said publicly that Israel will have any weapon it wants if Hamas violates this agreement. I think Trump fully expects Hamas to violate this agreement, just like Hezbollah has already violated their agreement multiple times. They can't help it. They're terrorists.
I hope you're right. The thing is, Hamas in the past, when it does sign such a deal, it usually is because it needs a break from fighting, and so it does hold up its end of the bargain with these little, they were supposed to release the names Saturday evening or afternoon, and they released them Sunday morning. They do that things just to show who's the boss. But yeah, I do expect, at least the next few weeks to see hostages return, but that means if this is a good enough deal for Hamas, it's a bad deal for Israel. And yeah, I completely agree. The second stage won't happen if Israel holds on to the demand that in the second stage Hamas completely disarms, because they're never going to do that. But are they gonna demand it? I don't know. Israel is the one showing weakness in these negotiations, and I expect that to continue. Anders.
Yeah, I'm not very optimistic at all. I think Israel is its own worst enemy in this. I think Israel could have done a lot more. I'm sure they were arm twisted by the Biden administration, but I think Israel has shown that they can do a lot on their own. Now, hopefully, I don't know about Trump. You never know about Trump. And he's, as Michael mentioned, he's the dealer, right? And I hope I'm wrong, but I think we will just see a quieting down over these next 4 years. I doubt that Trump will support Israel in taking out Iran completely. That would be wishful thinking on my part. I'm pretty sure that he will strike a deal of some kind with Iran as well. And then these people, the Islamists, I wouldn't be surprised if they just lie low for 4 years to see what happens next, because we have to remember that they're playing the long game. Okay. This is a game that started in the year 600 AD, and as much as we despise them, they have a long-term plan, and they can be very patient too. So and that is obviously to the Israel's and the West's disadvantage. So 4 years of relative quiet, maybe, but depending on who then comes into the White House or whatever, all hell can break loose again. Maybe it takes 10 years, maybe it takes 15 years. But
Yeah. The troll in the chat says, I'm willing to collect money, but not to pay. Well, when ARCUK has a sponsor a troll project, you'll be the first to know. But anyway, enough with the likes of you. Back to Trump and with his basically, regarding domestic policy. Jim, what are you most hopeful for, and what are you most worried about when it comes to what we can expect in the next 4 years?
Okay, what I'm most hopeful about will have to be some specific issues on which I side with Trump's policies. We might, and I stress might, be seeing the beginning of the end, or maybe the apex of climate hysteria. You are seeing corporations drop their climate, their climate hysteria policies. You're seeing banks drop their pro-climate hysteria lending. These dominoes, you're seeing net zero in Europe becoming weak. You have some holdouts like the administration in the UK. Trump just announced in his he said, I might have even written it down. I was taking notes as he was speaking. He said, we're going to have he used the phrase drill, baby, drill. He said we're going to, I thought this was typical Trump cute. You know how Biden would say, I'm going to declare a national climate emergency? Trump says he's going to declare a national energy emergency, and we're going to we're going to drill, baby, drill. Now that's typical Trump hype, but he is his instincts are at least are correct. So on that and a few other issues, I'm very hopeful. Energy is so seminal to a strong economy, and a strong economy is so essential to successful politics that it's hard to, overemphasize it. What I'm most worried about is a unforced philosophical error. And I think the risk of that is fairly high. So just take, for example, the promise of tariffs to enrich Americans at the expense of it. I mean, Trump has stated he will use tariffs, across the board tariffs, to enrich Americans, to punish other people, to collect revenue, all kinds of little purposes like that, as a negotiating tool. So I don't think he will deliberately, he won't deliberately destroy the economy, but he may miscalculate in this area. We don't know what for example, what his tariff policy is going to be. He could miscalculate, and he could trigger an economic disaster, because we live in a very fragile economy. So I guess unforced philosophical error would be my biggest fear.
Michael, same question. What are you most optimistic about and most fearful about with the next 4 years?
Yeah, I share Jim's. I mean, the fact that America was energy independent and exporting energy before, since the last Trump administration, and one of the horrible things that Biden did was to stop that, proudly shut down everything. We've got this pipeline, Keystone Pipeline across the U.S., which is sitting dormant, just withering away. All that work, all that energy, all that quote environmental destruction that was done, and now we're not even using it to create anything good. This will get rehashed. I think oil and gas will come down in price, which will of course propel the economy forward. I think that hopefully this Doge group that put together now with just Musk running it will actually reduce federal government, because all you need to do is look at the staff of these congressional people and senators and everything, and it's the millions and millions of dollars of useless idiots that are running around the Capitol feeling important, gathering information for people like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and also people on the right side. It's got to stop, because it seems like an unlimited budget. So I hope he shuts down government. I think the tactics, I hope, is mostly a deal negotiation issue. We've discussed that before, and it's too long of a discussion. He's got to do something about Kennedy heading up the Department of Health and Human Services, because the man's frankly a Fruit Loop. And he's anti-vaccine of any vaccine. It's just, as a doctor, it's just stupid. And I will continue to get vaccinated with everything I should. And the people that are on the fence, in a growing number, both on the left and the right, will go the wrong way, and people will start dying again of really ridiculous things, and potentially get polio and measles and things like that, and end up with incapacity. So that really has to get fixed. The last thing I'll say is I'm optimistic about Trump because this is his last term. And I truly believe the man wants to go down as one of the greatest, if not the greatest, president in history. And I think he will hold himself to a few real metrics, which will include employment and inflation, as well as the performance of the stock market. And frankly, if he does in the economy, it will be a disaster. He talked about this will be the beginning of the golden age of America. We're not going to be in decline anymore. And that means shutting down all these progressive apologists who think we should give the land back to the Indians, and that every oppressive thing in human history needs to be eradicated, erased, and looked at through the eyes of modern life. The last thing I'll say is that I do believe he wants to see peace in the world, mostly because that's what his shtick is this week. I'm not really sure what it is. I do hope he takes out Iran. I don't think allowing Iran to get to nuclear weapons will be compatible with his overinflated vision of himself, which I agree is overinflated. But Biden's vision of himself is also overinflated, to be frank. And every president is, people in power tend to be that way. But I don't think that he will be able to, I don't think history will judge him well. And I think hopefully he knows that. If Iran gets a nuclear weapon, because the West, again, did nothing. By the way, we did nothing with North Korea, and they ended up with nuclear weapons. We were in the same exact situation. We've learned this has been done before, or in this case, not done. So we know how to stop this, and it has to be stopped.
Well, it's not that we did nothing. Didn't Madeleine Albright go there and ask them not to build?
Nicely. Absolutely. Yes, there was the usual, Jimmy Carter-esque kind of he also asked the Iranians to please return our hostages. And then a week later, Ronald Reagan made a phone call, and suddenly 53 American or 54 American hostages were on a plane back to America because they were terrified. And that sometimes just carrying a big stick is all you need.
Yeah, well, I almost forgot about Kennedy until you mentioned him, but luckily, one thing that's not going to be difficult in the next 4 years is coming up with topics for shows. Anders, what are you most optimistic about and most worried about?
Well, I think I echo Jim's sentiments. I think we will see hopefully a renaissance in energy, not only oil and gas, but especially nuclear, which is so bogged down in regulation. We have basically lost 50 years of nuclear development. So that is an area that I hope can improve. And if we do that, as energy is powering everything, that would be good for the economy, and that would hopefully buy us time for better ideas to start to penetrate society. I also share Jim's worries about the economy because of the tariffs and such, and I would be interested in Jim's thoughts on this. But I hope the bond market will be keeping Trump in check, because we haven't talked about the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and that is the U.S. entitlements and the debt load, which is now up to some 160 trillion if you include the unfunded liabilities, and that has to be addressed sooner or later. And the bond market knows this, so they are slowly driving up the interest rates on the government debt, and that would be a nail in the coffin for Mr. Trump if he is not paying attention to that.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Go ahead. I wrote a whole book about this, Andrew. So yes, I completely agree.
That's where I got it.
Oh, thank you.
Not part of it.
Yeah. Well, many others have made the point. I just would add one other somewhat hopeful point, which I did not mention, which is almost on an equal with better energy outlook, and that is, I regard the Biden administration as the most openly corrupt and tyrannical administration in my memory, and I'm 76 years old. I have never seen anything like this in the United States. The suppression of speech, the outright disregard for the Constitution in so many areas, and the use and the collaboration with what is sometimes called the deep state, an entrenched bureaucracy that was so willing to do the bidding of the administration status quo. I hope that Trump will make a dent in this embedded edifice, because it's been very frightening for me to live through. So I'm hoping that he will restore, stop the weaponization. For example, this is an overused phrase. Stop the weaponization of the Justice Department. This has been a travesty to me. It's been hard, the worst thing I've seen in the United States of America in my lifetime. So I hope this can change.
Well, Mark Zuckerberg did say on Joe Rogan that the Trump people from not Trump people from the Biden administration would call up Facebook and say, to remove content that they weren't happy with. So,
Zuck is just the tip of the iceberg. That's right, of course, but he's
yeah, and Zuck, maybe the tip of the iceberg, but he's gone through some interesting changes. And later this week, we do have an episode scheduled titled Zuckerberg Transformation Theory, which is, if you look at what some people on the internet are saying, it's there's interesting ideas there. Yeah, I agree. I'm most optimistic about energy policy. I'm most fearful about not knowing what I should be most fearful about because I don't know what Trump might change his mind on and why. Was it somebody, commenting on his hair, or like what exactly would annoy him? And that's my fear. He is unfortunately a loose cannon who I don't think really respects the kind of limitations on power to whatever extent they still exist.
At least
But
with Biden, you only knew it was going to get worse over time because unfortunately, dementia only gets worse.
well, again, I'm very happy. Look, it's they can both be bad, and I'm very happy. The show that we just did was titled "Biden's Reign of Terror Ends." So I'm no Biden fan by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm not a Trump fan, but I hope to become a Trump fan. Let's I'll pay close attention. Um, all right, we are out of time. Quickly, Jim, where can people find more from you?
okay. I write on Substack as Hard Bunny Jim, and I have allow me to shamelessly promote my book, A
Yeah.
Black Hole in Economics, Money Creation and Its Consequences. If you read it and find it useful, I would appreciate a few lines in the Amazon review section. And I thank any of you who have read it. It's been a work of love, and I may never do it again.
And can I also add that all royalties go to the Ayn Rand Center UK, so that's
Yes,
another
indeed.
incentive to buy the book. Michael, where can people find
Well,
more?
that wasn't the reason I bought the book, and I'm about, let me check my number here, about 19% through it. Really good. Also, I'm not an economics major by any stretch, and it's definitely understandable and really eye-opening. I mean, it's quite remarkable. It also, we haven't gotten to the good parts where Silicon Valley Bank falls and all, but we will, I'm sure, get there. But it's really helps you kind of see things, and at least at the initial level. So thanks, Jim. Great book and strongly recommended also from me. Michael Kaufman, 2Fs, LinkedIn.
Thank you,
And
Michael.
Anders, where can people find more from you?
Well, so Trump, he wants to create a new department of Government Efficiency. We don't need new government departments. We need fewer government departments. And if you're curious about how to go about that, check out my book, Think Right or Wrong, Not Left or Right. It's available at an Amazon outlet close to you. And you can also find me on Substack, andersingemarsson.substack.com.
I'm
May I
Razi.
also,
Yeah.
I was going to say that it is also a very readable book and very highly recommended.
Thank you.
As is Andrew's Substack. Very solid advice, actually amazingly solid advice in almost every topic.
And sorry,
I'd call you a philosophical polymath.
Thank you.
You can also get very good advice at Razi Ginsburg on X. Actually, I don't know if it's good advice, but it's interesting rants. And of course, we are back tomorrow with the Daily Objective and the reality show. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.